Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 2 of the CameraShakePodcast with Nick Kirby and Kersten Nuts, the photo and video podcast coming at you straight out of isolation into your eardrums. We'll be talking about talk life in isolation, what's happening in the world outside, and if we're lucky, we'll hit on photography too. Hi, Nick. How's it going?
It's going.
How's your week been so far?
Yeah, no, fine since last week. Trying to keep myself busy. Got on with our next photo challenge, which was great fun. Can't wait to talk about that a little bit later. I've been finishing up some other video work that I've had going on and also printing some DVDs and getting some artwork together for the school project that I mentioned in the last episode. Also been doing a little bit of audio work too with some colleagues. We're doing a Queen challenge this week. So that's been good fun too. So how about yourself?
Yeah, it's been pretty busy this week. We've been doing lots of different things. Mainly been working on some video projects, making some photos, particularly to do with the photo challenge. That's always great fun. You know, it's something different to do. And it's a great way to be creative, even when you're stuck in a house. You're working on the photo challenge just made me think of a number of different things. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's great that we're stuck in a house, but we've got all of our gear to create lots of different, photographs and videos. And, although we're stuck in a house, we still have all of our stuff. But just imagine if you were stranded on a desert island somewhere and all you'd have is a bag. Like, what would you put in? What kind of photo gear would you take with you? Let's say you could take, 3 items that you could pack into your photo bag.
For me, I'd have to take my camera, my Panasonic GH5S, and I guess I'm going to have a lens that goes with that. So I'd probably take, my 12 to 35 mil. That's a Lumix G lens to go with that. And given that it's going to be somewhere we want to be and it's going to be particularly bright and sunny, I'd probably take an ND filter, a variable ND filter to go with that. Do I want to take a tripod and something like that and swap one of those out? No, I think I could make do without a tripod in this instance. I think an ND filter would help me more taking videos and photos with that gear. Yeah. I'm sticking with that. That was my gut instinct.
Right.
How about you?
That's pretty good. I would take my Fuji X100F.
That's compact.
First of all, because that has an ND filter built in already.
Oh, nice.
So that's pretty cool.
Bonus.
And it's a fixed focal length, so it's the same 35 mil equivalent lens. And I've been enjoying that for the last year or so. Because it kind of limits you in certain ways, but it also simplifies things. When I first got it, I got it for that reason, actually, originally, and I kind of thought it might be a nice challenge. And a lot of people used to say, like, oh, well, but that's going to be tricky, and you won't be able to change lenses and, go for a different model because, yada, yada. So, but I found it really good fun. And it's my go-to camera pretty much for whenever I go on a trip, when we go out with the family or we go on holiday or something like that. That's usually the camera I take. So that's a pretty good all-round little travel camera. The picture quality is awesome. And although it's now been superseded by the X100V, still the 100F, if you can get it secondhand, probably at a really good price these days, it's a fantastic camera still to get into. So I would definitely take that. The other thing I would probably take is just my little Rode video mic, because I actually quite like the Fuji for video too. Like, the picture profiles work really well straight out of the gate, And so if you're just filming, with the family and stuff like that, then it's a really really nifty little camera for that, and with an external mic, brilliant. The third thing, I'm not really sure. An extra battery. Couple extra batteries. That's pretty much all I'd need, I think.
It's funny you mention the fixed focal length. When I very first started learning photography and the basics of cameras and things like that. I had one lens, and that was a nifty 50, and that's all I had, and I stuck with learning with that, and it forced me to understand what to do with that lens to still be able to get the shot that I wanted to try and get, and that's the basics of, simply moving closer to the subject, moving further away from the subject, rather than relying on your variable focal lengths. And I don't think that it's a nice limitation. It makes you think about your shot in a slightly different way. So I like that idea, taking a prime.
Yeah, I think, I got to the point where, when you have a collection of lenses that you use for all sorts of different, different photo jobs, let's say, or different, photographic projects, you really get used to having that variety and having all of these options. Your standard set of lenses, like the 14 to 24, 24 to 70, 70 to 200, you can really do 99% of all things photographic with those three lenses. If you were like a wildlife photographer and you needed like a super long focal length, and you go for like a 300 or 500, anything like that, that's an additional thing. Or if you're into macro photography and you want to do that, and you get a macro lens, that's another thing. But actually, for most general portrait work, for example, or corporate work, or events or anything like that, those basic three lenses, 14 to 24, 24 to 70, and 70 to 200, are all you need, really. Prime lenses are nice, awesome. Of course, they're great, but you don't necessarily really absolutely need them.
No.
And so I think when you have these choices, once you got to the point where, you can afford these pro lenses, and you have all of that choice all the time, then at some point it's nice to just limit yourself. I think it makes you think much more creatively.
Yeah.
And also, it's just a drag having to drag these lenses around with you all the time because they're heavy. Yeah. It's heavy glass.
But that pro glass is, if you can afford it, obviously they're just as fast as prime lenses, throughout the range as well, as far as I can tell. Not always, obviously, but a lot of the time. I'm guessing some of those lenses that you've got, those Nikon ones, are they just as fast as what their prime equivalents might be?
Well, almost. I mean, they're 2.8s. So it's great. They're great. They have great optics in them. They're great looking. They produce great looking photographs. They're great lenses. They're solid. I mean, you can literally go to war with these lenses. That's another thing from a professional point of view. Of course, you need them to last. They're expensive, so you need to make sure that they last. I think on average, I would say you'd probably change your camera body every 3 or 4 years. Maybe more regularly than that. But with pro glass, you probably keep the same lens for like a decade. Or longer than that, until you sort of move up to the next model, or the next reincarnation of the same model, if you want. But these lenses are solid, and they're great wide open apertures for things like events. Of course, prime lenses, 1.8 or 1.4 prime lenses, or even 1.2 prime lenses are fantastic, and of course they let in more light, but they're also incredibly expensive given the fact that you only get one focal length for it. So bang for the buck and versatility and reliability and all of that thrown in together, the pro lenses, the Nikon pro lenses, and also the Canon pro lenses are they're perfect for your working photographer. And it's an investment that's really going to pay off over the course of a decade. You got to think, as a professional, you spend that money up front, and of course they're a few £1,000s per lens potentially, but you make that investment, and then of course you keep the lenses for 10 years, 12 years, maybe more than that, and they make the money back for you. And from a business perspective, that's kind of how I think all the time. It's when I think about, wouldn't it be nice to have a, I don't know, 100 mil macro lens or something like that. Yes, it would be nice. Is it going to make me the money back? Not in what I do. It wouldn't. So, as soon as I arrive at that point, I'm like, maybe not yet. Maybe some other time. So I think, but just creatively, it's then, it's nice to just limit yourself.
What else did I read about this week? Oh, quickest topic, because it really excites me, tech. So I recently got sort of the latest MacBook that came out 6 months ago, whenever it was now, and I love it. It's got eight cores. I forget the actual speed of the processor, but I just saw today that Intel have announced their latest generation of processors, and they're reaching speeds of over 5 gigahertz with, I think, 8 cores and 16 threads in them. So none of that really matters what that is. It just matters that they are super fast. It's the fastest processors I've come across. So I'm desperately hoping that they're going to end up in the next batch of MacBooks that come out, because I may have to just sell this one and go upgrade straight away. As I was reading it, they're explaining that 4K footage will render twice as fast using this than something like what I'm using right now with the processors that I'm using, perhaps even faster, more times than that.
Right, so here's a question for you, Nick. As a videographer, I'd be interested to know what you think about the upcoming Canon R5, because as you've probably heard, that is going to be able to shoot in 8K. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that? Do you think that makes sense? Is that usable? Is that something that we need, or is that just total overkill and pointless?
Well, need is very subjective, I guess. No, don't need it. Is it a nice to have? Hell yeah. And so the reasons I guess 8K is going to be a positive thing overall is that 8K will do to 4K what 4K did to 1080p. So when 4K started to come around, you can film in 4K, downscale that in your output to 1080p, and the picture quality is going to be better in that 1080p output than had you originally filmed it in 1080p.
So say that again. So when you film something in 4K and then you downsample it to 1080, that 1080 will look better than if you had filmed it in 1080 originally. How is that? Why is that?
In my opinion, that's how it looks and comes across to me. It's subjective, and there'll be people who will say that it doesn't look any different to them, and that's obviously that's fine. But to me, the picture quality is still better. I guess just because I had so much more information to begin with, that it's just got better information to choose from. I don't know. I'm not that way inclined as to understand all those nitty gritty. I can just tell you from my experience of doing that, I believe that picture quality looks better at the end of it.
So do you think it's sharper, or are the colors better, or how does that manifest itself?
Sharper more than anything else. Sharper more than anything else. The colors, not so much. I guess it depends from camera to camera. On the GH5S, my colors are actually pretty consistent between 4K and 1080p. But it's definitely sharper. And the added benefit that you get from filming in 4K and downscaling to 1080 is that you can zoom in on the 4K footage and not lose any quality because you're still going to output at 1080.
That's a real advantage.
That's a real advantage. It really is. So most people still don't produce their content in 4K, their final output in 4K, because the majority of the world can't consume it. So you might have a 4K TV. That's great. You might be able to play that back on there. Are you playing 4K back in Chrome on YouTube? Yeah, possibly as well. Is your monitor actually showing you 4K footage there? Very unlikely. So most people aren't consuming it. So it's why still the majority of videographers will still produce the 1080p content. But that's changing. More and more people are moving into having 4K enabled devices that can view that on, which is great. So that now makes sense to start producing 8K cameras so that you can do the same thing with 4K footage, downsampling to 4K footage. So, now you film in 8K, now you can zoom in and still have a 4K output, and it looked perfect. You can, and ultimately your 4K output will, I have not tried this. My assumption is going to be that if you'd filmed in 8K, it's going to look slightly sharper, slightly better when it's final output at 4K than had you originally shot it in 4K. That begs the question of, do you actually want anything to ever look any cleaner and sharper than 4K? There might be some scenarios like, stock kind of nature or landscape footage where that super, super sharp, super high res footage might look great. But for films and general video content, I'm not sure I want to see anything sharper than 4K. It starts to look unrealistic to me.
What would be the disadvantages or the downsides of shooting in 8K? I'm guessing that it would put a lot more work onto your processor, right?
Unbelievable amount. If you take 4K today, I can just about edit one layer of 4K footage on my machine without changing anything and get away with it. And I've got the most powerful MacBook that's currently on the market right now. Yes, you can get Mac Pro, you can get the towers and whatnot, and they have faster processors. But there are ways around it. It's only now that I can handle 4K footage as it stands, but prior to that, no machine could really handle it. Couldn't play it back. So you've got a couple of different options to overcome that. Primary one is to create a proxy for your footage. So as soon as you import your footage, you can create a proxy at 1080p or at 720p. I generally create them at 720p because when I'm editing it in that way, I don't need to see 4K footage. It doesn't make any difference. I can still color. I can just toggle it on and off if I need to see it back quickly. So a proxy file, for those of you who may not be aware, is simply a duplicate clip of what you've imported at a lower resolution. So I've got clip number 001 here at 4K, and I've created a proxy of clips number 001 at 720p. And within Premiere Pro or Final Cut, for example, you can just toggle that on and off. So if you toggle proxies on, it will just play back the 720p versions rather than the 4K or 8K.
Yeah. And then because it's a smaller file size, it won't put as much strain onto your processor, and therefore it'll run more fluently, and you can edit without it stopping and starting.
Exactly. Exactly right. No stuttering. And I even find on this MacBook, if I have more than one 4K clip, layered on top of each other, it starts to struggle. If I'm doing any multicam work with 4K footage, it starts to struggle. It really doesn't like it. So I have to, in fact, a multicam shoot where there was ultimately like 10 or 12 different cameras, some with 4K footage, some with 1080p footage.
I remember
it couldn't even handle it at 720. It's not handling it at all. So actually, I've gone down to 520. I'm not 560. I'm not even sure what that resolution would be now. I don't use it.
I remember that shoot.
576 or something silly like that, just to get it to play back.
So in the photo world, the equivalent there is to work with multiple layers in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Because that's you can really tell when your machine's starting to struggle with that. And, just about any laptop will be fine with, 10 layers or whatever in Photoshop. But when you get to like 100 layers, that's when, especially when you're sort of copying down the image onto individual layers, and then that adds to the whole file size. But yeah, once you hit like 100 layers or something, then, it can get a little bit hairy then. For sure. So we did a shoot not too long ago where there's a car shoot, and the final image was a composite of about, I think it was about 100 or over 100 shots in the end. And that was, I think the file itself was something like 11 or 12 gigabytes. So it's a huge Photoshop file in the end. But yeah, it's because it was such a massive composite. And my machine is really quite old actually anyway. So I was definitely pushing it to its limits at that point. There are ways around it in Photoshop as well, because you can go through the process. You can save at a certain point and then open up a new project and do half the work in one and the other half in the other one. So you can kind of split the files to keep it simple.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So how many photos did you have on that shoot? Did you say?
Say that again.
How many photos did you have on that shoot?
So in the final composite, there was composited. I think there were just over 100 different shots that made up the final shot. Yeah. And
that was on, I don't know what size, which camera are you using? Nikon D800?
Well, that was a D750.
Sorry, 750.
So it was 24 megapixels per image essentially. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was 100 raw photos. Obviously they're raw, because you shoot in RAW. So the file sizes are quite large anyway. And so if you imagine if you've got 100 of those, the reason why you use so many shots in this particular project was that we essentially photographed the car, but because we lit individual components of the car, we then composited the final image together. So for argument's sake, you take a shot where you've lit the rims of the tires or the wheels, and you like the light on that, but then we took 3 different shots off the front bumper, for example. We lit that in a certain way, so we took the lights on that, and you take some reflections from a different shot, and we took some interior shots, composite that in, and we took some environmental shots where we put a whole lot of water on the tarmac. So we took some shots of that. And everything in the end, then it gets composited together, and it gives you the final image, which pretty much looks like, a photo straight out of a car catalog.
The sexiest looking Toyota RAV4 I've ever seen.
Yeah, because in real life that RAV4 is pretty boring, really, but it turned out pretty cool in that image. And of course, that's the thing. When you go to a car dealership and you look at a catalog or you look at a website or whatever, then these photos always look amazing. And actually, then when you drive, I don't know, like a Ford Focus or something like that, which is a pretty boring car, granted, I'm always surprised how they managed to make them look so good in the advertisement. And that's really how, that's one of the main techniques.
Is that, did you post that photo anywhere?
So you can find that photo on the CameraShake Facebook page.
Okay, good.
So you'll find it there. So if you go to Facebook and type in CameraShakePodcast, it'll take you to our page. You can see it there.
We should put up that time lapse I did as well of the shoot.
Yeah,
that's worth looking.
Yeah,
at.
In fact, time lapse was interesting because you can actually you can really see how we did the shoot.
Yeah.
So it's check that out.
Cool.
Right, for the next part of today's podcast, we are super thrilled to introduce our first guest on the show. Please welcome Mr. Daniel Ackerley, wedding photographer par excellence. Daniel, how are you doing?
I'm very good, man. Pretty good.
Excellent, cool.
Just doing, we're locked down and all that. Yeah.
Well, how's that going? How are you coping with the whole lockdown thing?
It's been more difficult with mental health, actually. I think more than anything. It's I obviously, like a lot of freelancers and self-employed people, sort of panicking a bit about money, but I think the biggest issue really has been not being able to get out and do what I normally do. I think the only thing that's been good is the weather's been nice. So yeah. My wife's put me to work around the house, which I've actually enjoyed quite a lot. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think my main concern for people, apart from the sort of people not having a lot of money, is mental health issues for a lot of friends of mine who are struggling, being stuck in. I think that's a really big issue, actually. So, yeah.
Because you're, under normal circumstances, you're really super busy, right?
Yeah. I mean, ironically, this time of year is sort of my downtime. Although I usually have a couple of months off at the start of the year, and then I start to get busy around about end of March, start of April time. So about now, I'm starting to get get some work in. I usually take January, February, and most of March off if I can. I do a few little bits and bobs. Music related work around that time of year is really good, but I don't really do any wedding related work until much later in the year. But obviously from about now until about October, I'm usually absolutely rammed. So I'll be gearing up now to getting busy, but that's obviously not happening. In fact, as far as I'm aware, my next scheduled job is not until August. So
Oh, well.
It's all been postponed or rearranged, which I guess we'll talk about in a bit. But
Yeah. I mean, just to give our listeners an idea as to what it is that you do. You shoot weddings, and you shoot a lot of weddings, right? And because I've known you for at least 3 years or something like that, because you originally shot my wedding.
I did,
right?
Yes. We were just talking about it earlier, weren't we? Fantastic.
And we'll get into that in a second. But basically, so over the last 3 years, since I've been sort of following you on social media and everything, I can see you've been getting busier and busier year on year. So your wedding business, under normal circumstances, is working really well.
Yeah, I mean, if we step back a few months before this pandemic, this year was I'd gotten to a point actually where September last year I stopped taking bookings for this year. I decided at the start of last year I wanted to only take 40 bookings for this year, for 2020, and then I stopped and I ended up with 51. So, mainly because I made the mistake of telling people in September on my business page I'm fully booked. But then I did put a caveat to that, and that was unless you're having a Star Wars themed wedding or you're getting married on a Tuesday in November and it's going to be really cool. Yeah. And then I got a load of winter bookings from people going, "Oh, we were thinking about messaging you, and we're doing this, and and one was a Star Wars wedding, actually, funny enough. So I took a few more extra bookings on the time of the year when I would be starting to slow down a bit. So and then I thought, actually, no, that was way more than I wanted, but it's hard to turn down, money. And not least when me and my wife were looking to buy another house. So we decided that I would do a few extra ones. But that's proving problematic now, actually, with all these postponements. Whereas a lot of other people who haven't taken on so much work are finding it a bit easier to accommodate them. So yeah.
But it's, of course, that's for a small business owner, if you want, that's that is absolutely critical, isn't it, at the moment, because how you're getting by. Well,
cash flow is king, isn't it? When you run a small business, especially when you're self-employed. I've been fortunate in a certain extent in that I think I might be able to weather this a little bit better than some people because I've been saving for the past few years. So I've been busy, but I've been busy for a reason. One of the reasons is because I got married myself, and I realised how insanely expensive it was to get married, and so I didn't want to borrow any money, and that's proved. Looking back now, that's proved to be a bit of a godsend because we didn't borrow any money. I shot 63 weddings the year that I got married, and I took on an extra 15 just to pay for my wedding. So that's what I decided to do, and I did. It paid for everything. It was perfect. And then this year I decided again I'd do a few. The idea really is longer term. I put my price up a bit and do less, but I don't know what's going to happen now with everything that's going on. But I have saved, so that's lucky. And then I've been negotiating with my clients individually over the past sort of 3 or 4 weeks, based on their own circumstances, to what we can do financially going forwards with all these postponements and things. Because there's other issues that people aren't thinking about, like tax brackets and all kinds of stuff like that. That are going to be affected when people change their dates and move to different years and different months, all that kind of stuff. So,
and of course, it's the wedding industry in general that's been hit really hard. It's it's photographers, but it's also everybody else who's involved in weddings.
Well, it has, and of course, the problem with the wedding industry is the whole thing is based around a social gathering of some description. And they're not normally, even the smaller intimate ones, you're still looking at 20, 30, 40 people, and the much bigger ones go into the hundreds. So social gathering ban has had a huge impact on the whole industry. There's nothing else to say about that, really. I mean, it's the thing is, it's one of the first things here, and it'll be one of the last things to be relaxed.
Yeah, but it was something interesting we talked about a little while ago, so in the run up to this podcast, and you were telling me about like an online wedding fair that you've been taking part in. Just tell me what that is.
There's a lot of innovation. I mean, and someone drew a parallel recently to it feeling like we were at war, which wasn't entirely sure. I wasn't entirely sure it was a good analogy in some respects. But I tell you what, where it is a good analogy is that we see lots of technological advances when we're in a war setting, because people are desperately striving to try and make those leaps forward to help the cause. And in the sense of the wedding industry, there's been a lot of innovation recently where people have realised they can't do things that they used to be able to do and that we've taken for granted. So they're trying to innovate and do things in different ways. And so I'm someone that does maybe 2 or 3 wedding fairs every year. There's a couple that I go to that are really good. They're very hit and miss by and large anyway, but a couple of people decided that what they would do is because they've got big captive audiences on their social media accounts and stuff, they would do a digital wedding fair. So what we're doing is we're posting little videos telling people about what we do as a business and what we can offer our clients, and then we're going to use Zoom to do live webinars so we can have actual conversations. I think it's a fantastic idea. It's I think it's cottoning on, and it helps us be able to sell to people even though they're stuck at home. So, whether or not people are still going to book weddings, I don't know. I think you'd have to be a bit mental to book a wedding right now. But having said that, people are still spending money and booking weddings. And I've taken a few bookings in the last couple of weeks myself. So, I think anything like that's really good. And it's forcing me as well to come out of my comfort shell and do things that I'm not used to doing. So,
yeah. So what else are you doing whilst you're in isolation?
Well, there's a couple of things, actually. I've signed up to be an NHS volunteer responder, so I've just got my thing through for that. So I'm going to try and do that a couple of days a week. My wife's put me to work around the house. But from a photographic point of view, I've done a couple of things, actually. I've made a big list of things that I've been avoiding doing for the last year or two, one of which was doing videos and learning how to use Instagram stories properly. I mean, I'm 39 now, and I feel like I'm really disconnected from the generation like below me when it comes to digital marketing. Yeah. I think I might have mentioned this to you the other day as well. Like, something I've always taken for granted is that I get a lot of recommendations from my wedding business, so personal recommendations. I worked out last year that 80% of my bookings came from people I'd either met at other weddings I photographed or they'd recommended from a previous couple. So I've always been very lax with my SEO, for example, on my website, or the way I use my Instagram to its full potential, because I've never needed to. And now I'm thinking that this has actually been a shock to the system, and I need to think of different ways to do things, because it's not that I don't take that for granted in that sense. I mean, I really appreciate that, and I work hard to cultivate those kind of relationships with my clients, that they feel very happy to recommend me to people. And I think it's really important that I meet people at weddings who then book me, because they get to see what I'm like to work with, because I'm there at a wedding with them and they like that, and they then see the pictures and they think, well, yeah, it's an easy decision to make. But at the same time, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. And I've been I'm very aware of the fact that I probably got into that sort of doing that recently. So I think there's good opportunities to come out of this with very positive things. And I think one of the most positive things is that I'm going to be a bit more up to date with the digital marketing aspect of my business and using some of these social media channels to my advantage and to their potential.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because by and large, it's really relationship marketing that sort of drives your business forward under normal circumstances.
It really is, yeah. And I always say to people, even when I meet them to talk about weddings and stuff, wedding photography, I say, you should speak to a few photographers really, but get a feel for them. It's so important that you get that personal relationship between your photographer and you, because, as we were saying before we went live, we were talking about the fact that, how on your own wedding day, Kirsten, we had such a laugh, and, the weather wasn't brilliant, but we embraced it. And that's why we got such awesome, unique photos, and I'm always about that. I'm always about embracing, challenges. I'm never one to sort of moan about stuff, and when you shoot weddings, there's so many variables for so many different reasons. And, if you're the kind of person that lets those things get you down, you're never going to take the photos that you could potentially take. And I always think in my mind, the best way to get the right photographer for you is to have a personal connection with them, and I think one of the reasons that I do so well in my own business is because I connect with people really quickly, and I feel like I'm quite fun, and I'm quite relaxed, and I'm not a bossy photographer. I don't turn up at weddings and start taking over and turn them into photo shoots. I hate that. I really hate that idea of being that old cliche bossy wedding photographer. That's just not my style. Now, a lot of people don't shoot that way anymore these days anyway. A few years back when I first started doing photography, I was a little bit more unique in the sense that I was very hands-off. I mean, I come from a music photography background, and I'm a very informal person. As you can tell, I'm not very formal at all. And that helped me, because a lot of my weddings are for couples that are a little bit paranoid about being posed, or they want to have a nice fun day, not have the wedding that their parents had. And so that's all really helped me. And I feel like that's the reason why my business has done so well, because I do think that, once you get past you can look out there and see loads of different photographers, and there's a lot of really good photographers around. I mean, a lot of them are my friends, and I love them dearly and stuff. But all of us have got our own little unique selling points that help us connect with certain people and that help you find your client and your couple. And I think that that's incredibly important. And I say that to everybody: speak to a few photographers, get a feel for a few people. If you like loads of people's work, it's going to be that one person that you just connect with a bit better, because that's going to make you feel like more comfortable, because these people aren't professional models. You and Kurt, I mean, you and Regan, you're good looking people, man, but you're not models,
No, I mean, but the thing is, like, the way we connected was because I remember, because obviously, when people know that you're a photographer, and they learn that you're about to get married, the first question anybody asks you is like, who are you going to get to shoot your wedding, right?
Yeah.
And so that was obviously, I know that's how it went down for you. It was the same for me, and I was looking for somebody. I wasn't necessarily even looking for a wedding photographer, actually, to be honest. And I came across
that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, wasn't it? About my own wedding photographer.
Yeah.
And actually, just to quantify the "you're not models" statement, what I meant was not that you're not good-looking people. It's more that from a point of view of like posing, But yeah, no. With my own photographers, I booked two people that are actually better known for music photography than wedding photography, even though they do wedding photography, because I wanted that kind of vibe. And also, we were having a music festival kind of wedding, so I knew what I wanted, and it wasn't necessarily sort of traditional wedding photography. Yeah. So I booked a sort of what I call an alternative photographer. And actually, funnily enough, the way I've been, one thing, just going back to what you're saying before about how things have changed, I think one thing I realised as well, like now that I'm thinking about my marketing a bit more, is that I've always been a bit too reluctant to go too specifically down one route, in the sense of using words like alternative wedding photographer, because I feel like that sort of pigeonholes you a little bit. But there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And I'm actually thinking, the more I think about that, and bearing in mind that, when I started doing this, what I was doing actually was alternative wedding photography without really knowing that I was doing that. Yeah. And now I think it's actually a term that I'll be quite comfortable to use. And actually, a lot of people use that to refer to me. And I was always a little bit negative about it, and I quite like it now, actually. I think it helps set me apart from, the noise and the saturation that we have with wedding photography. There's a lot of people just doing wedding photos, Yeah. And then there's some people doing wedding photography, which I think is a slightly different thing. So, yeah.
Which I think when we first met, I think you only just gotten into wedding photography, I think.
I've been doing it for a few years. I think what happened is in 2015 or 16, I started to take it seriously. Yeah. I'd actually been doing it for 3 or 4 years before that. Right. But actually, this goes back to something I just said a minute ago about some people shoot weddings and some people are wedding photographers. My mindset changed. I started to realise that I could just float around taking photos of weddings and they'd be great. But if I really wanted to get good at it and really embrace it and actually enjoy it more myself, and actually work with people that I really want to work with and shoot those really fun, cool weddings, I needed to be a bit more specific in the way I shot and what I look for and how I actually allowed myself to be creative in those sort of circumstances. So I think when I shot your wedding, I just got a bit more confident with that, and I started to realise what my strengths and weaknesses were. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I embraced the weather thing, because I was like, I don't care that it rains, and if anything, it's going to help us get photos that maybe other people won't get. And it ended up working out absolutely perfectly for your wedding, didn't it?
Yeah. And I could just tell the story real quick. So on my wedding day, it just happened to be the wettest August day since 1945. So it was pouring down like hell. And we had originally, we thought, there's a nice bridge, by a lake, not too far from our house, and be the perfect kind of, Victorian looking sort of wedding photo. But of course, you always imagine it with the weather being great and all the rest of it. But as it happened, it was just pouring down, and I'd already kind of bent that idea, And I remember you saying, "Well, I'm okay. Let's go," we really went, "Okay, let's go."
I was like, put your boots on, grab a brolly, let's go. Let's just go and take those photos, because that's what's happening,
And of course, that's exactly what made those photos totally unique, because I don't know, within my circle of friends, I don't know anybody who's got, wedding photos in the rain. Like
no, and actually, do you know what I remember? It's funny enough, talk about Instagram and that. I remember when I put them up. Do you remember they got a lot of love when they went up? It worked because you guys were so cute together. And there was those pictures, with Regan, with her boots on. It was really cute. But also, I think it was the fact that you just embraced it. And I think people love to see that. And I, as a photographer, I love that. I want people, and I actually think you've hit on something really important there about what's important about wedding photography, really. As I was saying to you before, I could take any number of people to a bridge and do whatever poses, and I could take 100 different poses and it'll just be a pose, Or I can go to a bridge in the rain with two people like you, and we have a laugh and have fun, and you get a picture of you guys being yourselves. It's not just a pose. Yeah. I don't remember us really posing all that much at all. No, I think I suggested a few little things to you guys, and you just did it yourself, and I just floated around taking photos of it, and that's why those photos are so good, because it's you being you in those circumstances, you know.
And it was super fun to shoot as well.
It was a laugh, wasn't it? I remember. Yeah, it was great.
So you've really come to photography through shooting gigs.
So music's always been my first love. I've been in bands. I was in a sign band when I was a kid. Music was a natural way for me to get into another creative outlet. So I worked in the music industry for a little while as well, as a scout and then A&R and then in PR, doing press releases for bands and stuff. But whilst all this was going on, I've always had a love for imagery, especially band imagery and music imagery. And so what I decided to do was to basically buy a camera and try and do some gig photography. And of course, I had a lot of clients who were PR clients of mine who didn't have any photos. So they basically said, why don't you do some photos for us? And a little bit, I guess it's a little bit like your story, doing the music stuff. It's like circumstances, played into my hands. And because I knew a lot of the promoters locally to me from my own band gigging and doing shows myself, it's very easy for me to get passes. I'd say to them, if you let me in, I'll chuck you some pictures you can use for your promos and stuff. And so I just threw myself headlong into it. And actually, it's funny because it reminds me of a conversation I had with my dad. I was one of those people that kind of fell in love with things really quickly and decided I was going to do them and then give up on them really quick. I've always been like that, very spontaneous. And then he said to me, "Oh, you're going to do photography now?" And he wasn't taking the mick. He was just like, it's just another thing that I was going to do. And he said to me, what do you want to achieve with it? And I actually said to him, if I can get a picture in my local newspaper, which was the Hunts Post, said in 3 years, I'll be super chuffed. And then within 6 months of buying my first camera, I had a full page picture in Kerrang.
Awesome.
Which is like ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But I took to it real quick. And I think the reason is because I love music so much. I didn't give up on the photography. I read everything I could. And I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, obviously. I was going to 5 or 6 gigs a week to photograph them, to try and figure out how to do this gig photography. And I'd done no photography at that point before, but I had been to university to do film production. So I had an idea of how these things worked. And so I just threw myself at it 100%. And I developed this massive passion for it. And then you fast forward a couple of years, and inevitably what happens is one of your mates tells you that he's getting married and you're photographing his wedding. And you say, "No, I'm not. I don't want to shoot a wedding. Why would I want to shoot a wedding?" Because in my mind, it's just this boring, horrible, formal event. Yeah. And then he didn't book a photographer, so he made me do it. And I ended up enjoying it. It was amazing. But of course, that created another issue, which I'll talk to you about later, actually. But that created another issue for me. But that's in a nutshell how I got into wedding photography. I kind of got blackmailed into shooting a wedding, and it turned out pretty good. And then,
And now you're officially an award-winning wedding photographer.
Yeah, I hate to say that, though, because it feels like... It's just, I'm embarrassed by it. It's embarrassing. Sometimes people ask me about it, and I'm like, I have technically won some awards and stuff, but I don't want to stick it on my website or anything, because it just feels like I don't know. I don't want to say I'm waving my dick, but that's what it feels like. And I'm immensely proud of those awards and stuff. I've worked hard for them, but it's just one of them things. It's cool.
Yeah. Nowadays, whenever I'm asked to shoot a wedding, which doesn't happen very often, but occasionally does, usually what I do is I check out your website and I'll be like, what would Dan do? Let's check that out.
That's actually really nice. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just to get some creative input for sure. Yeah, because you're flipping awesome at what you do.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say that.
And I think photography is one of these art forms that allow you to develop literally indefinitely. You'll never get to the point where you know it all, you can do it all. Because there's so many different avenues.
That's interesting that actually you bring that up, because I have this conversation with people all the time, like, how do you get into photography and stuff? And as an art form, it's something you teach yourself, and I say this, I've got friends that have got I mean, I'm not going to mention names because they might see this, but I've got friends that have got photography degrees that cannot take a photo to save their lives. You know, so, you know, it's not something you just get qualified at. You know, my qualification is my portfolio and my experience. You know, and it's extensive now. You know, and I think like any art form, you know, if you've got a passion for it, even creativity though can be learned. You can learn to be creative. You can learn to see things in different ways. You know, I think all of us have got a natural ability to be creative. I think a lot of it maybe gets schooled out of us in certain ways when we're growing up, or we lose the confidence to be creative. And so it's sometimes a difficult thing to kind of relearn as you get older. But I think all of us have got that ability to learn to be creative. And photography is an incredibly rewarding medium for creativity. You know, you can do anything you want with it. You know, if you've got any kind of imagination, you can do anything with photography. You know, you can really you can go crazy with it, or you can just do simple stuff. You know, and sometimes, you know, a simply taken black and white portrait is amazing, or sometimes some crazy composite shot of you doing your wife's housework can be that can be fun as well. You know.
There's so many ways in. That's how I always think. You know, it doesn't matter where your interests lie. You know, you could be into music. You know, music photography is an awesome thing. You could be into, I don't know, still life, and then that's your way in. You know, or you like, you know, sometimes it's interesting actually when you talk to other photographers, because I always find that sort of, very broadly speaking, two categories of photographers: those who like working with people, and those who are really scared of working with people. You know,
that's actually, I think that's massively true. And I know wedding photographers that are scared of working with people, and I know some that hate people as well. You know, so, and that's probably the worst place to be a photographer if you don't like people. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about different ways of doing photography. I meet very few wedding photographers that said, "Oh, I've always wanted to be a wedding photographer." You know, it was always we wanted to do music or something really cool, and then we kind of fell into doing weddings. But of course, the reality is that, I mean, specifically talking about what I do, you know, I got into music photography because I love music, and then I loved imagery, so it made sense to combine the two. But I also made a sort of conscious decision to do that because I knew that I would be committed to it, and so that helped me develop my skills, which are obviously, when you realise that, they're very transferable. And actually, I find shooting weddings are very much like shooting gigs. Actually, you know, you have to be very proactive. There's a lot of variables that you have no control over, like lighting and all that kind of stuff like that. And when you get good at that kind of thing and preempting body language, I think one of the best things I learned shooting gigs is learning to read body language and when people are going to do things, and you can preempt when something's going to happen. Weddings are just like that. You get a sense, it's like a sixth sense for knowing something's going to happen, and then you have to go and capture it. So I found that all the gig photography was really good training for shooting events with lots of people where lots of stuff are going on, and you might not directly relate them, but they are, and all these things are transferable, you know.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things I found when I first got into shooting concerts, is that, you know, having been a musician, having been on the other side of the lens, you know, for a very long time, and then all of a sudden taking photos of bands, it's like you already have that kind of sixth sense, because you know how people move, and you know what's going to happen on stage, and you can read people, and you sort of know what's going to happen before it actually happens, and you're ready for it.
I totally believe that is one of the reasons why I got good at it quickly. The creativity side of it, I think I always had in me. The technical ability, like you, as you know, Kersten, the technical stuff, you know, that's something you continuously learning all the time. You're learning how to be better at things you're already good at, for example, you know. But with the band stuff, I knew things were going to happen, and I knew how to what I didn't know was how to capture them, like, the best way. Did I have the right lens? You know, am I using the right shutter speed? You know, have I got a camera that's, you know, going to give me an ISO that is not going to look like a potato at ISO 800? You know, that kind of thing. And so I had those limits. But actually, what I realised now is that, you know, when I was doing that gig photography, we're talking about mid 2000s. I had a 350D or a 400D or something. Anything above 800 ISO, you couldn't use it, and you didn't really want to use it at 800. But what I did is I learned how to use that camera to the best of its potential. I knew what its limitations were, and it made me a better photographer. It made me so much of a better photographer.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Later on, when I got the better camera, and it could do all the things I prayed my other camera could do, and I appreciate it much more. So I think learning your gear is really important. But yeah, doing the music stuff was a really good grounding for me for doing events, because I think they're actually a lot more related than people think. Yeah.
So where do you want to go when everything goes back to normal? What's going to be like your first step?
That's an interesting conversation. I don't know, actually. I don't think it's going to go back to normal. I think there's going to be a new normal when this is over. How it affects my industry, that is an open-ended question, because I think a lot of things are going to change. I'm also sort of worried about the fact we might have a recession after this, which is going to affect people spending money. I mean, here's what's been sort of sobering for me is that as much as I love what I do and I work hard at it, and I think I'm at a pretty good level at it, I'm ultimately a luxury that is not needed. You know, I go and photograph weddings and stuff, but I am a luxury purchase. You know, I'm a want, not a need. And that has kind of made me rethink the way I do things. And I have been thinking about maybe doing other things outside of photography. I've got lots of other interests, you know, and so I have been thinking about possibly doing that, so that I'm maybe not so susceptible to something like this in the future. Because as it stands, I'm unemployed full time now. You know, I've got no work coming up. You know, everything I have has been rearranged until at least August, and it might get rearranged again because I'm totally at the mercy of this now. Yeah. Everyone that works in my industry is, you know, and the scary thing about it is it could take longer than even we think, because let's just say, for example, the lockdown is relaxed a bit in July and they start letting people out again. The last thing they're going to start letting people do is do mass social gatherings. Now, they might let weddings happen, but they might say, well, you can't have more than 20 people or something. Some of my couples will say, that's fine, we'll do it anyway. Others are going to say, that's not the day we want, so they're going to cancel or rearrange. But then you've got other issues as well. Like, so something I hadn't even thought about yesterday. Well, a friend of mine's a florist, and she said, the problem I've got is I can't get my flowers from Holland now. So even if they, you know, the lockdown finishes, where am I going to get my stock from? Because there's going to be none to begin with. You know, there's massive knock-on effects. So yeah, it is in my mind that maybe I need to think about doing something else as well. And I'm not entirely sure right now. Luckily, I got a bit of time to think about it.
Yeah. And of course, it gives you time to do things like this, you know.
Well, yes, as well, yeah. And also, you know, the other thing, talking about that as well, think about, you know, videography. I want to start doing some videography as well, you know. I did make music videos back in the day when I went to university and stuff, but it's been a long time since I did anything like that. And I quite like to use my camera. You know, my 750s are pretty good at video, so yeah, it'd be good to learn on that. And then before I finally go Sony.
Oh, no. So have you thought about Nikon's sort of recent mirrorless offerings, like the Z6, for example, or the Z8?
I'm sorry, have I been thinking about going to mirrorless, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been on my mind. I've got two sort of strains of thought with this kind of thing. Again, it goes back to that conversation you and me had the other day, where some people bang on about it as if no one had taken a good photo before 2015. You know, now, you know, how could you have ever taken a photo on a digital SLR? You know, Sony's are everything. Now, they're obviously fantastic. I've used one briefly from my friends, and they are brilliant bits of kit and stuff. Are they going to make you a good photographer if you're not one already? No. You know, are they going to make you a better photographer? Not really. I think it's different ways of working with different technology. And in my mind, at least, you know, I feel like it's a massive first world problem. Like, I've got 750s, which are amazing bits of kit, and I know how to use it, and I get amazing results from them. Am I really missing out by not having the next best camera at the moment? I don't necessarily think I am. I think a lot of this comes down to, with technology, is, you know, is it going to make a difference to your clients? And I don't think my clients will be able to tell you if I shot on a Canon or a Nikon or a Pentax. Yeah. And I don't think they actually care. They just want the results. Now, if I ever felt like I wasn't getting what I needed from my cameras, I would make that decision. I guess the other strain of thought I've got with this is that because I use my cameras heavily, you know, my 750s are shooting 50 weddings a year per body. I'm shooting probably 2,000 images per body per wedding. That's 100,000 clicks a year probably. I would be looking to change them every 18 months probably. So I'm in that position where I'm going to be upgrading on a constant level anyway. My cameras are just gear. They constantly get changed out. And so I might get to a point where I feel like I might make the change and go to mirrorless. I think there are some advantages. I like the eye focus. That's pretty cool. Although my other thought of mine is Nikon and Canon, they're starting to respond to this themselves. Sony took a head start. They took a punt and they nailed it. You know, fair play to them. But I don't personally feel like I'm missing out too much at the minute. I would imagine at some point, though, the major manufacturers will kill the digital SLR, and probably, I think mirrorless is the future. There's no denying that. But I think it's got a few years left in it. Yeah, you know, so. Yeah, I mean, it is a first world problem. I mean, it's not like. I mean, the cameras we've got now, the 750s. I mean, don't tell me that's not an incredible camera for the money. It's absolutely insane.
The one I'm shooting on right now.
You know, and I'll tell you what, it's better than 90% of people that own it. It's more capable than 90% of people that own them. That's the reality. It's more capable than me. I'll tell you that now. It can do more than I can do with it. So I'm not missing out as such. But yeah,
it's probably. I mean, it's definitely for sure the most versatile camera I've ever owned.
I think, and it's amazing value for money as well, considering all of the stuff that he does. Yeah,
and it's it's one of those things. I mean, I always think when it comes to upgrading, I always think like, am I going to make the money back? Like, is the additional feature worth it so that I can justify upgrading?
Is it going to make a difference to your client? That's that question I ask myself. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, the only thing, obviously, now that I'm doing more video than I did before, and comparing it to Nick's GH5, for example, the difference is it's like day and night.
Yeah.
So it would make a lot of things much easier and quicker and so on and so forth. But am I really going to justify spending the money on the GH5S or Sony? Or
here's the other thing as well. Like, this goes back to another issue, or not an issue, but a thing that's worth talking about is that pro level equipment's never been so accessible.
Yes,
it's very affordable now. And like you said it's about justifications at the end of the day. If those Panasonics and those Sony videos they are much better than what you're getting out of the Nikons, because they that's what they've decided to do, and because they saw the gap in that market and they smashed it, and fair play to them. The videographer that works with me, Mark, he uses Panasonics and he absolutely loves them.
Yeah,
he's got a little Lumix one as well that he runs around with to do, and the quality is insane. And it's so much more usable than my Nikon. But it's based to do video, but does photos. Whereas mine's a camera that does a bit of video.
Yeah. So I recently bought, last year I bought a Fuji X100F, and I just bought it because I like the look at it, because I like the look of it, and I wanted like a little run around camera type of a thing, And I didn't want to drag like lots of lenses with me all the time and like big bodies and whatnot. And I have to say, the video on it is actually surprisingly good.
Is it? I've got a friend that shoots Fuji. Most of the people I know that have got Fuji, funnily enough, have got them as little walk around cameras, like what you just said. They've got brand commitment with some other brand, and they've got loads of lenses. But they wanted a little walk around, so they get a 35mm on it and use it as a little travel camera or whatever. Yeah. But everyone I know that's used them says they love the color. The colors are insane, and then a lot of them praise the video quality. I've never used one, but I love the look of them. I think they look beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest advantages I find is that you can go to London, or you can take pictures of like buildings or whatnot, and you never get bothered by the security there because they never think that you're a pro photographer. They always think like you're a tourist with this thing.
Yeah, because it just looks like a little point and shoot. That's right. Yeah, no, but they're very capable, aren't they? I mean, I know people that use them professionally to do weddings and stuff, and they take beautiful photos of them. I mean, it's like anything though. You know how to use it. You work out what it's good at, what it's not so good at. It just goes to show, if you're a good photographer, the best camera is the one you have. So.
Yeah, it's ultimately a tool, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
So in this part of the Camera Shake podcast, we're going to have a look at the weekly photo challenge. Nick and myself, we challenge each other every week to make a photo or a video. This week's topic was float. So we're going to come up with a photo that somehow depicted anything that can possibly float. So we're going to bring the first photo up, and Dan is going to constructively critique it, I think is the word. So the first photo up is, in fact...
No pressure.
No pressure at all. So the first photo is Nick's photo. Nick, I'm going to pass this over to you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that photo?
Yeah, sure. So when we initially discussed the topic as being float, I couldn't decide how I wanted to go about that and what I wanted to do. And just one day, I was making a sandwich, and I knocked some stuff on the floor. And that kind of just shot in the idea of, how about I attempt to make a photo of me making a sandwich in one go. So that's where the idea kind of developed. And so, as with any photo like this, 95% of it was set up and getting the photo ready. And I spent no more than 5 minutes taking photos. I think less than that maybe. So how I ended up going about the setup here was, I spent about 20 minutes actually just trying to get the right angle. My kitchen there is probably difficult to say for sure. It's actually a very small kitchen, kind of very small galley kind of style kitchen. And so getting that angle where I knew I would be able to stand in the photo, I could have my hands out, and I could get enough scene in there to make it still interesting, was really quite difficult. So I got that set. I then put around as many objects as I thought was necessary to make it, an interesting thing to look at related to what I was making. So we've got obviously the chopping board there, with some bread cut and the bread knife and so on. And then, some things kind of related to me. We've got some spices down there, a little cat kind of picture thing, if you like. So I've got a couple of cats, coffee, very much a caffeine man. A couple of Star Wars references in there as well, which me and Kay, and I believe yourself, Dan, love. So got to get that, and some hot sauce in the back. And so that was that. And then I took some, got some photos of the scene as such. And then to do the sandwich, the way I ended up doing that is I'm not a big fan of taking a photo from one place and literally just dropping it into another photo. What you're seeing actually happened. That those sandwich bits were there, and it's exactly where they're photographed as well. So, and this was the challenging part. So where my hands are, I actually had a tripod on one end and I think it was a mic stand on the other end, with like wooden skewers taped together with all the bits and pieces of the sandwich strung on those skewers and then taped to the mic stand and the tripod. And so the real difficult thing there was getting them to stay in the right places that looked cool without them starting to slide off, down, or tear and things like that. So that's where they are. That was quite difficult. Took a lot of shots of that, tried to move things, and then chose the best one after that I particularly liked. And so I took a few photos of that, a few photos of me with my hands out. So I got the right one that kind of fitted the scene right. And then from a lighting perspective, the lighting actually changed a lot while I was in there. So I kept the blind down so I could have a bit more control. And then I had actually got my my aperture light on its lowest setting, 300D, with a purple gel over it. And that's just have one little flood of purple light. It was very, very faint because my walls are kind of that lilac-y purple color. And then I had my flash on top of my camera, pointing up to the ceiling, with it half covered with a purple gel. So I tried it full covered, and it was just too much. Without it, it wasn't quite enough. And I just half covered it with a purple gel and taped that over it, and took the photos that way. And that's the end result. And then from an editing perspective, I just masked out the sandwich photo and overlaid it on top of the one with me in.
So is that just 2 photos?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I could give you some. I'll give you some feedback if you want.
Definitely, please.
Conceptually, absolutely fantastic. It's really well done. I love the Star Wars references. I've already seen them straight away. I like the fact that your coffee maker looks a bit like a Rebel pilot helmet as well.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, no, I like your expression is funny as well, and I love how there's a lot of space between the ingredients so you can see them. I think the only issue I have with this, and you hinted at the end there, is you had issues with the lighting, and you could tell it looks a bit muddy and a bit sort of, and I think the purple thing is not helping you in this situation. One, because your skin tones are a bit off, like you look a bit sunburnt, like you've been enjoying the lockdown.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I have just come back from Australia.
I'll let you off then, dude. But I think the biggest issue with the lighting being like that is it actually stops the ingredients of the sandwich popping as much as they could from you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, and there's like a cast across the whole thing, isn't there? Like a magenta cast across the whole thing.
Totally, and I think you're absolutely right. And in post, actually, I cooled it down as well in post, and so that's because it was ultimately ended up being too much when
Yeah,
those
I mean,
photos
red skin tones
there.
are difficult to deal with at the best of times. I mean, as Kirsten tell you, if you're ever doing any gig photography, red skin tones, my God.
Yeah.
But it's, I would say that's the only thing that kind of lets it down as far as, because I think everything else about it I love. It's a small space, you can see that, and you've done a really good job of it. I love all the little references. I love the way that you've got the sandwich, like you can see it all clearly. The only thing, that lets it down is the lighting's a little bit muddy. But actually, one of the reasons why it's let down by that is partly because Kirsten's lighting's so clean. So when you contrast them together, because on its own you would notice it, but it wouldn't be the issue that it might be.
Yeah.
In contrast to Kirsten, because his lighting's very consistent in both his photos, and it's very clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're saying nothing that I
imagine that you knew that anyway. Yeah.
I knew myself already that, you always look back on the photo and you go, I wish I'd done that.
I think if you put that ham on your face, you wouldn't see the ham. I tell you what, though, creatively, it's absolutely brilliant. And I love how the idea of how you managed to get all the bits on the tape and stuff. Because actually, you've saved yourself two jobs. One is that you're able to visualize it before you took the photo, which is really helpful. But secondly, it means you've only had to put 2 photos together rather than 20.
Yeah.
From different bits. So actually, no, I think it's great. And I love the concept. I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10 easy, maybe not 8.5, The only thing about it is just the lighting's a little bit off, and that's the only thing,
I will take that. That's
I think it's a really cool picture. Put it this way, if I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw it, I would definitely stop and like it and think it was a cool picture, man.
How did you get all the different ingredients to stay in the air and space them out like that?
Actually, what are those 2 middle bits? Are they
tomato?
Oh, it's tomato. I was trying to figure out if it was like a carrot.
No.
That's a weird sandwich, man.
So they were actually quite challenging.
Maybe the tomatoes could have been side on there.
Angled in. Yeah. It was actually quite difficult to get.
Yeah.
I ended up having to just go with what was actually other shots. They were a little more side on. But as things started to turn, this was the best one collectively that worked for me. And I was really keen, like you say, to keep it with one photo on those ingredients if I could, rather than starting to switch between more than one.
So here's the other question then. Did you photograph this and then so what I'm thinking you've done is you've taken a photo of yourself afterwards and then you've edited out the bits from behind so that you could have, what's the word I'm thinking of? Isolate them when you do the That's really good, mate, because it looks really like it's right in front of you as well. Yeah.
The only other criticism I'd have of myself on this one is I think in places, I think my masking could have been better on some of those ingredients.
I think the thing is with Instagram as well, because it's small, you don't see that in detail.
That's true. That's true.
I think maybe if I'm being ultra critical as well, maybe the bread at the end could be higher up because it feels like it's a bit too low from your hand, if you know what I mean. Or maybe you're
on the left-hand side of the photo.
Yeah, but that's just being super critical. But then it's being super critical that makes you better at things, So
absolutely. That's exactly why me and Kirsten wanted to do these kind of weekly challenges, if you like, because we're just improving ourselves all the time doing this.
No, definitely, it's a quality picture though. I love it.
And one other tip, just thing that is worth mentioning, people may be interested. What I did in post on just those ingredients is I added some motion blur in Photoshop.
Ah, okay, cool.
Just a touch, what you find is
otherwise it would be too clinical, wouldn't it? It'd be too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're in that kind of position, you'd kind of expect them to have been moving a little bit.
It makes it look a bit more like it actually might have happened as well. Then, otherwise, it's just things hanging in front of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, that's really good. I think it's a quality picture, man. Yeah.
Cool, man.
So again, my photo was based on the topic float, and there's really 2 things that came together there. One is, I wanted to make myself float, and secondly, my wife told me I had to do more housework. So you put the 2 together, that's what you get. So yeah,
I was saying ironically, you didn't do the housework, though, did you?
No, apparently not.
You made more mess.
In fact, I totally messed the place up because my living room does not look like that normally. Yeah, so I mean, it's probably the hardest part about this photo, to be honest, was actually moving the furniture around. That was that was definitely the toughest part.
How many photos are these? Is it just 2 photos again?
Yeah, it's actually just 2.
Just 2.
Yeah. So in this one, really, it's really predominantly down to the sort of set design, if you want to call it that, because you're thinking of a particular action, and you build the set around that, and you then you literally put the action in. So the other thing is, of course, everything you see in that photo really kind of sort of depicts my personality. If you want, I'm a musician, I'm a guitarist, so that's what I do. Clearly, you're going to see a lot of guitars in the picture. I'm a massive Star Wars fan, so you're always going to find some kind of Star Wars reference in there somewhere.
Yeah. I can see BB-8. Yeah.
Yeah. I try to hide him, but
See, I'll tell you what I like about this picture is the 2 guitars kind of balance the picture really well because they frame you.
Yeah.
Either side of the frame. That's really good. Also, your balance of the light with the ambient light is really good because you can still see the blue sky.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you're using some kind of flash. Is it? I'm thinking it's camera left.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, it's camera left, pretty high up, pretty much under the ceiling.
Yeah, like you can just see the reflection of it in the mirror, can't you?
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's difficult to be critical of this picture because I think it's really good. Just out of interest, are you on a step ladder or something like that? Is that how you've balanced?
Yeah, I'm on a bar stool. Yeah, so I can still feel it in my abs, by the way.
Got you. And where is that? Is that on your hip?
No, it's just underneath my rib cage.
Oh, okay. Because I'll tell you what you've done well, which I see a lot of people don't do very well when they do these pictures, is they get that flatness at the bottom side where they're on a stool and you can tell.
Yeah.
But you've done it really, really well. You can't really tell that. So I guess the question: Have you used a sort of maybe a brush to bring your shirt down a bit?
No, not at all.
Is it all natural? It's cool.
It's all natural. Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it works really well. I mean, I say the only thing that annoys me, the only thing about it that I don't like about it is the acoustic behind your arm.
Yes.
That's the only thing. Yeah. I find it difficult to be critical of anything else about that. Maybe the music thing could be not rather than off screen, maybe within the frame totally.
Yeah.
And that little guitar there, that probably isn't really needed. But apart from that, I mean, it's fantastic, technically brilliant. The light is really good. What you've got really good here, which is something that Nick didn't quite get so good, was the lighting thing. I mean, then you're using flashes and Nick's balancing gels and stuff, which is always going to be more difficult, especially with white balance. But yours is really good, and like I said, you've balanced it really, really well. But of course, God. What would I say? Okay, I'm going to say it's ever so slightly better than Nick's, but only just because I actually, if I'm honest, I kind of think Nick's concept is slightly better, but you've executed yours better.
Right.
So I'm going to give you a 9. Nick gets 8.5.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a 9. But they're both actually fantastic. And I actually think that you guys are going to push each other. You're going to start producing some really fun stuff. This is both fun and it's clever. And actually, what I like about this kind of stuff is that if you push yourselves a lot and you get your lighting right, this can make up a portfolio for commercial work that people love because they love creativity. True. Thinking outside the box, doing stuff like that. That's stuff that people want to. That's branding work.
Yeah.
But and that's the reason we started this, Winnicke, is that we do want to push ourselves while we're. And the thing about these challenges is they're twice as hard because we can't leave our homes. to do them, right? Yeah. It makes it very, very difficult. And
but that's also going to improve you because it's going to make you have to work with what you've got.
One thing me and Kay were talking about earlier was that when I first started learning photography, I just had a 50mm, nothing else. That's it, and that has to stretch you. You've got to learn what that 50mm does and what it can't do.
It's still one of my favourite lenses to this day. And in fact, whenever anybody buys a camera and they ask me what lens to get first, I say, go out, buy the plastic 50mm 1.8, start to learn about depth of field, start to use prime lenses. It's still a brilliant lens. It's still my favourite portrait lens.
Yeah. I use it all the time, actually. That and an 80.
I use mine all the time.
So, yeah. Yeah, I think, the interesting thing about photo challenges like this, and this is, generally I sort of give that as a piece of advice to just about anybody who's stuck at home at the moment and wants to either dabble in photography or is already, who's already done a lot of photography in the past, like picking photography challenges is a really great idea in this time. It doesn't really matter whether it's like a 365 where you take one picture every day, or whether it's a 52 or however many weeks there are in a year. Is it 52 or 54? I can't remember. Anyway, one of those.
Yeah.
One picture a week.
No, I agree, because I was sort of actually, so just before we move on to that, I was going to say one thing about the compositing thing. Is that if there's one thing I know about compositing, and I don't know a lot about it, but I've got a friend called George Fairburn who takes amazing composite images. The key thing, and this is again, it goes back to struggles that Nick had with the change in light situation. When you're doing composites and you're shooting over a period of time, that light changes, and it's getting that lighting right, which is what can make a composite look like a really like natural shot or a clearly composited shot. It's getting that balance that is really hard to do. And it's especially hard to do when you're trying to balance color gels and ambient lighting and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing I do know. But the other thing about challenges is that I was really worried last week that I might not shoot a wedding for 6 months. Like, am I going to lose my skills? Because a lot of the stuff I do now when I shoot a wedding, it's second nature to me, so I don't have to think about it. I'm just buzzing around doing what I do. If I don't do it for a long period of time, I do get rusty, and I do when I take my time off over Christmas. I needed a couple of weddings before I really start, hitting the heights. And so what I did is I got some Star Wars figures, and I did a Star Wars wedding in my back garden. and I put the picture, it went viral. I got loads of likes. I had a journalist interview me about it, trying to get it in the paper next week or something. And so I'm trying to think of things to do myself to be creative, and one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to get all my Star Wars miniatures out and start doing battle scenes and stuff like that.
Wicked.
I think it'd be fun. I can use my lighting. I did one a few years back when we got snowed in 3 or 4 years ago one day, and I've got the guy that used to live opposite my house had a red light on his patio that flooded the whole of our site. So it was this big red light. I remember looking at it and I was thinking, that's really cool. So what I did is I put a snow speeder in the snow on the bonnet of my car, and I put an ATAT walker that was actually about the same size, way behind it to give you the right depth of field. And then it snowed a bit, and I took some photos with this red light coming in, and I balanced it with my own blue light coming in to give you the red and the blue, so you had the Star Wars thing. And I took a couple of pictures, and one of them turned out amazing. And I sold a load of prints of it because people loved it so much. It's on my Instagram somewhere, but I might post it again. But things like that are great. If you really care about photography, you can find interesting things to do everywhere.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And on that note, if you don't know what to do tonight, find yourself a photo challenge for sure.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so thank you very much. Dan Ackerley, what a fantastic guest. You've been the first guest on our show. You've literally christened the show. Woo. Excellent. So
you said I've been a fantastic guest. I might end up being the worst out of all of them.
I doubt that very much.
Best guest today.
I'll take the compliment. Thanks very much.
Wicked.